not what happens in your mind as you fall asleep tonight. Imagine yourself settling into the most comfortable bed you've ever known. The sheets are cool against your skin, perfectly weighted, holding you in that gentle embrace that says it's finally time to let go. Outside, the world continues its endless motion. But here, in this space you've created, there's only stillness and the quiet rhythm of your own breathing. Your pillow cradles your head just right, and as you close your eyes, the darkness behind your eyelids becomes a canvas for something extraordinary. You're standing at the edge of one of the most fascinating journeys your consciousness takes every single night. A journey that billions of humans have made since the dawn of our species. Yet one that remains endlessly mysterious and beautiful. This is the moment when wakefulness begins its slow dissolve into sleep. When your mind transforms from the bright, alert sentinel of your day into something altogether different. Something that will spend the next hours weaving dreams, consolidating memories, and allowing your brain to perform maintenance it simply cannot accomplish while you're awake. Let's explore together what happens in these precious moments as consciousness gently releases its grip. The twilight threshold. Understanding the sleep transition. The moment you close your eyes and settle into bed, you're embarking on one of the most complex neurological transitions your brain performs. This isn't like flipping a light switch. Sleep doesn't arrive all at once, crashing over you like a wave. Instead, it's more like watching a city at dusk, where different neighborhoods dim their lights at staggered times, creating a gradual cascade of darkness that spreads from one district to another. Your brain, that extraordinary 3-pound universe inside your skull, contains approximately 86 billion neurons, each one a tiny biological computer capable of forming thousands of connections with its neighbors. As you lie there in the growing quiet, these neurons are about to orchestrate something remarkable. The process begins in the deeper, more primitive parts of your brain, the subcortical regions that handle fundamental operations. These ancient structures, which we share in various forms with other mammals, are the first to register that conditions are right for sleep. They sense the darkness, the horizontal position of your body, the stillness, the drop in ambient temperature, the absence of immediate threats or pressing tasks. All of these signals converge in regions like the hypothalamus, a structure no larger than an almond that nevertheless serves as one of the most important command centers in your entire nervous system. In the hypothalamus, particularly in an area called the ventrolateral preoptic nucleus, something like a biological switch begins to flip. This isn't a simple on-off mechanism, but rather a sophisticated seesaw that balances between wakefulness and sleep. Throughout your waking hours, this system has been gradually tipping in one direction. Now, as you lie in bed, it begins its tilt in the other direction. The technical term for this is the flip-flop switch mechanism, and it's one of the most elegant solutions evolution has devised for managing our sleep-wake cycle. Imagine two teams engaged in a tug of war, each pulling on opposite ends of a rope. During the day, the wakefulness team has been winning, their neurons firing rapidly, flooding your brain with chemicals that keep you alert, focused, and responsive to the world around you. But now, gradually, inexorably, the sleep team begins to gain ground. They pull harder on their end of the rope, and the center marker begins to move in their direction. This shift happens in both directions simultaneously. The wake-promoting neurons begin to quiet down, while the sleep-promoting neurons ramp up their activity. This transition affects your entire brain in a cascading wave. From those deep subcortical structures, the change spreads outward and upward to your cortex, the wrinkled outer layer of your brain where higher cognitive functions reside. The frontal areas dim first, those regions responsible for executive function, planning, and self-control. This is why, as you drift towards sleep, your thoughts become less directed, less logical, more prone to wander down strange associative pathways. The boundaries between ideas blur. Thoughts that would seem absurd during full wakefulness now seem perfectly reasonable. As this cascade continues, moving from the front of your brain toward the back, different regions disengage at different rates. Your temporal lobes involved in processing sounds and understanding language begin to disconnect from external auditory input. The occasional creak of your house settling, which might have prompted investigation during the day, now barely registers. Your parietal lobes, which help you understand spatial relationships and physical sensations, start to lose their precise grip on where your body ends and the bed begins. That clear sense of your physical boundaries becomes fuzzy, imprecise. The visual cortex at the back of your brain, even though your eyes are closed and no light reaches your retinas, doesn't simply shut off. Instead, it begins to generate its own input, creating patterns and images from random neural firing. This is the beginning of hypnagogic imagery. Those strange, fleeting pictures that dance across your inner vision as sleep approaches. They might be geometric patterns, swirling colors, or brief snippets of scenes that make no narrative sense but feel somehow significant in the moment. Throughout all of this, your sense of time begins to distort. Minutes can feel like seconds or stretch into subjective eternities. Your awareness of how long you've been lying there becomes unreliable. This temporal confusion is one of the hallmarks of the sleep transition, and it results from changes in how your brain processes sequential information and creates the subjective experience of time passing. Perhaps most interestingly, your sense of self, that continuous feeling of being you that normally accompanies every waking moment, begins to fragment and dissolve. The narrative you tell yourself about who you are and what you're doing becomes less coherent. Self-awareness doesn't vanish all at once, but it transforms into something different, something more diffuse and less clearly bounded. You're still there, still experiencing, but the you that's experiencing has become something other than your normal waking consciousness. This entire process, from the first dimming of alertness to the completion of the transition into true sleep, typically takes between 5 and 20 minutes, though it can vary considerably depending on how tired you are, how relaxed you feel, what time of day it is, and countless other factors. Some fortunate people make this journey in a matter of minutes. Others, particularly those struggling with insomnia or high stress, may find the transition takes far longer, or may find themselves making the journey repeatedly, drifting towards sleep, only to bounce back into wakefulness when some thought or sensation pulls them away from the threshold. The neurochemical symphony, the brain's chemical transition. To truly understand what's happening in your mind as you fall asleep, we need to look at the invisible chemical symphony being conducted inside your skull. Your brain operates on both electricity and chemistry. And while we often focus on the electrical signals, the chemical side of the equation is equally fascinating and perhaps even more fundamental to the sleep transition. Let's start with GABA, or gamma aminobutyric acid, which sounds like something from a chemistry textbook but is actually one of the most important players in your nightly journey to sleep. GABA is your brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter, which means its job is essentially to tell neurons to calm down, to stop firing so rapidly, to take a break. throughout your brain. Billions of GABA molecules are being released at specialized junctions between neurons, binding to receptors and opening channels that make neurons less likely to fire. In the sleep-promoting regions of your hypothalamus and basal forebrain, special populations of neurons that use GABA as their signaling molecule become increasingly active as bedtime approaches. These GABAergic neurons, as they're called, send projections throughout your brain, reaching out to all the areas that keep you awake and alert. They're like a master electrician moving through a building at closing time, systematically turning off lights in every room. As these GABA neurons increase their firing rate, they begin to inhibit, to suppress, to quiet down the activity in wake-promoting regions. The targets of this GABAergic inhibition are multiple and diverse. In your posterior hypothalamus, there's hypothalamus, a cluster of neurons that produce histamine. And yes, this is the same chemical that causes allergic reactions and that antihistamine medications block. These histamine neurons are part of your brain's arousal system, and when they are active, they help keep you awake and alert. As GABA neurons begin inhibiting them, your alertness starts to fade. This is precisely why antihistamine medications that cross into the brain make people drowsy. They're essentially doing part of what your brain normally does to initiate sleep. Another target sits in your brainstem in a region called the locus coeruleus, where neurons produce norepinephrine, also known as noradrenaline. This is the brain's version of the fight or flight hormone. And when these neurons are firing, they promote wakefulness, attention, and arousal. As GABA neurons inhibit the locus coeruleus, your sense of alertness dims further. Your startle response becomes less sensitive. Unexpected sounds or sensations are less likely to jolt you into full alertness. Similarly, in another part of your brainstem called the RAF nuclei, neurons that produce serotonin begin to quiet down under GABAergic inhibition. Serotonin has complex effects on sleep and wakefulness, and while it's often called a feel-good chemical because of its role in mood regulation, it's also intimately involved in maintaining wakefulness. As these serotonin neurons reduce their activity, another piece of your waking consciousness dims. Perhaps most intriguingly, GABA neurons also target cells that produce hypocretin, also called orexin, a relatively recently discovered neurotransmitter that has revolutionized our understanding of sleep and wakefulness. Hypocretin neurons, located in your lateral hypothalamus, are like the brain's on switch for wakefulness. When they are active, they reach out to all the other arousal systems, coordinating and promoting wakefulness. People who lack these neurons, or whose neurons don't function properly, develop narcolepsy, a condition characterized by sudden, uncontrollable sleep attacks. As you drift towards sleep, GABA neurons suppress these hypocretin cells, removing a key signal that ordinarily keeps your brain awake. But the chemical changes aren't just about inhibition. There's also a build-up process that has been occurring throughout your waking hours. Adenosine, a molecule that's actually a breakdown product of the energy currency your brain uses, has been accumulating in your brain all day. Every thought you've had, every movement you've made, every sensation you've processed has required energy. And as your neurons use that energy, adenosine builds up as a byproduct. This adenosine acts on specific receptors in your brain, particularly in the basal forebrain where it promotes sleepiness. Adenosine is interesting because it represents a kind of homeostatic sleep pressure. The longer you've been awake, the more adenosine accumulates and the sleepier you feel. This is one of the two main biological processes that determine when you feel like sleeping. The other being your circadian rhythm, your internal body clock. When you drink coffee or tea, the caffeine in these beverages works primarily by blocking adenosine receptors, preventing adenosine from binding and thus temporarily masking the sleep pressure that has built up. This is why caffeine makes you feel more alert. not because it adds energy, but because it blocks the signal that tells your brain it's tired. Beyond these primary neurotransmitters, there are subtle changes in the concentration of ions, electrically charged atoms, and molecules in the fluid surrounding your brain cells. Research has shown that the transition from wakefulness to sleep involves marked changes in the levels of potassium, calcium, magnesium, and hydrogen ions in the cerebrospinal fluid that bathes your brain. These ionic shifts affect how easily neurons can fire and how they respond to incoming signals. Potassium in particular seems to play a crucial role, with its levels fluctuating rapidly during sleep-wake transitions. What makes this chemical choreography even more remarkable is how it's coordinated with your body's internal clock, your circadian rhythm. Deep in your hypothalamus, in a tiny region called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, sits your brain's master timekeeper. This cluster of about 20,000 neurons maintains an approximately 24-hour rhythm even in complete darkness, though it's normally synchronized to the external light-dark cycle through signals from your eyes. As evening approaches and light levels drop, this clock sends signals that promote the release of melatonin from your pineal gland. Melatonin is often misunderstood as a sleep hormone, but it's more accurate to think of it as a signal of darkness and nighttime. Its levels begin rising a couple of hours before your usual bedtime, creating what sleep researchers call the dim light melatonin onset. This rising melatonin doesn't necessarily make you fall asleep immediately, but it opens what we might call a biological gate for sleep, making it more likely that you'll be able to fall asleep if you choose to go to bed. Melatonin works by binding to receptors in various parts of your brain, including your suprachiasmatic nucleus, helping to reinforce the nighttime phase of your circadian rhythm. The beauty of the system is its redundancy and its robustness. There isn't a single chemical or a single brain region responsible for sleep onset. Instead, there are multiple overlapping systems, all working together, ensuring that this crucial transition happens reliably night after night. If one component isn't working perfectly, others can compensate to some degree. This is why sleep is generally quite robust in healthy individuals, why it takes truly extreme circumstances like combat situations or severe illness to prevent sleep entirely. As all these chemical changes cascade through your brain, they create the subjective experience of drowsiness, that heavy, pleasant feeling that makes keeping your eyes open seem like too much effort. Your thoughts slow down, become less sharp, less critical. The mental effort required to maintain focus on any single idea becomes overwhelming. Your mind begins to wander despite your best intentions, and you stop fighting it because fighting takes energy you no longer want to expend. The temperature of your brain itself begins to drop slightly, following the decline in your core body temperature. This cooling is actually important for the transition to sleep, as a warmer brain tends to be a more active brain. The metabolic rate of your neurons decreases. They're consuming less oxygen and glucose, burning less fuel, because they're doing less work. This reduction in metabolic activity contributes to the overall slowing and quieting of brain function that characterizes the transition to sleep. Interestingly, while all of this is happening, certain brain regions that deal with emotions and emotional memory, like your amygdala, may actually show increased activity during the transition to sleep. This might explain why emotional thoughts and concerns often seem to bubble up as we're trying to fall asleep. Why worries that seemed manageable during the day can feel overwhelming in the quiet moments before sleep. The rational, executive parts of your brain are dimming, while the emotional centers remain relatively active, creating an imbalance that can make emotions feel more intense. the hypnagogic state, consciousness in twilight. As the chemical changes in your brain progress and neural activity shifts, you enter one of the most fascinating and strange states that human consciousness can experience: hypnagogia. The term comes from Greek roots meaning leading to sleep, and it describes that twilight zone between wakefulness and sleep, where reality and dreams begin to blur, where the normal rules of perception and thought no longer fully apply. Hypnagogia is not sleep, but it's not quite wakefulness either. It's a liminal state, a threshold consciousness, a moment when you're poised between two different modes of brain function. If someone were to monitor your brain with an electroencephalogram during this time, they would see a distinctive pattern. Your alpha waves, which dominate relaxed wakefulness, would be giving way to slower theta waves, which characterize light sleep. But rather than a clean transition from one to the other, there would be a mixing, a back and forth, a kind of neural oscillation between these states. The subjective experience of hypnagogia varies considerably from person to person and from night to night, but certain features are nearly universal. One of the most common is visual imagery. With your eyes closed, you begin to see things. These aren't dreams in the normal sense. They're usually more fragmented, more abstract, less narrative than the dreams you'll experience in deeper sleep stages. You might see geometric patterns, kaleidoscopic colors shifting and flowing, faces of strangers that morph from one to another, or brief scenes that appear and dissolve without making any logical sense. These hypnagogic images are thought to arise from the spontaneous activity of your visual cortex. During wakefulness, this part of your brain is constantly processing input from your eyes, constructing your visual experience of the world. But as you close your eyes and begin to drift towards sleep, the visual cortex doesn't simply shut off. Instead, with no external input to process, it begins to generate its own patterns, creating images from random neural firing. These internally generated visions are often quite vivid, sometimes even more vivid than normal perception. Yet they have a fleeting, ephemeral quality. If you try to focus on them, to examine them closely, they typically vanish or transform into something else. Auditory hallucinations are also common during hypnagogia, though perhaps less discussed than visual experiences. You might hear your name being called, music that isn't playing, voices having conversations, or strange, meaningless sounds. These auditory experiences can be startling, especially if you hear your name clearly spoken in what sounds like a familiar voice. It's not uncommon for people experiencing this for the first time to actually get out of bed to check whether someone really called them. Even more unusual are tactile hallucinations, sensations of being touched, of something moving across your skin, or of physical presence near you. Some people report feeling as though they are being held down or pushed, which can be quite alarming. These tactile experiences may be related to the fact that your brain's representation of your body's position and boundaries is becoming less stable as you approach sleep. Perhaps the most famous hypnagogic phenomenon is the sensation of falling. This is extraordinarily common. Most people have experienced it at some point. You're lying there, drifting peacefully towards sleep, and suddenly you feel as though you're plummeting through space. Your body jerks violently, often accompanied by a racing heart and a gasp. This is called a hypnic jerk or hypnagogic jerk. And while the sensation of falling is a hallucination, the physical jerk is quite real. These jerks are a form of myoclonus, a sudden, involuntary muscle contraction. The causes of hypnic jerks aren't fully understood, but several theories exist. One prominent hypothesis suggests that as your muscles relax during the transition to sleep, particularly if this relaxation happens quite rapidly, your brain might misinterpret the sudden change in muscle tone as indicating that you're actually falling. In response, it triggers a reflexive attempt to catch yourself, causing your muscles to contract suddenly. Another theory suggests this might be an evolutionary vestige, a primitive reflex that helped our tree-dwelling ancestors avoid falling from branches while sleeping. Hypnic jerks are more common when you're very tired, when you have consumed caffeine late in the day, or when you are stressed or anxious. They are also more frequent if you've been engaged in intense physical activity before bed. About 60 to 70% of people experience them at least occasionally. And for most people, they are completely harmless, if sometimes embarrassing when sleeping next to a partner. However, if they become very frequent or violent enough to interfere with sleep onset, they can contribute to insomnia. One particularly fascinating aspect of hypnagogia is what's called the Tetris effect. Named after the classic video game, if you've spent considerable time during the day engaged in a repetitive activity, especially one that's relatively new to you, that activity can dominate your hypnagogic imagery. People who've spent hours playing Tetris report seeing falling blocks as they drift off to sleep. Rock climbers see the rock face, skiers see the slope. Remarkably, this effect has been documented even in amnesia patients who had no conscious memory of playing the game, but still experienced the imagery. This phenomenon tells us something important about how the brain processes and consolidates new information. During hypnagogia, your brain is already beginning the work of memory consolidation, replaying and processing the day's experiences. The Tetris effect is essentially your brain's way of integrating new motor patterns and visual spatial information. It's practicing, rehearsing, strengthening the neural pathways that encode these new skills. And some of this practice bleeds through into conscious awareness as hypnagogic imagery. The content of your thoughts changes dramatically during hypnagogia. Linguistic analysis of what people report thinking about during this state reveals a shift away from future-oriented thoughts toward present and past-focused content. Your prospective thoughts, your plans and worries about what's to come, diminish. Instead, your mind dwells more on immediate sensations and memories of past events. There's also a shift from cognitive agency, thinking about doing things, to motor agency, imagining yourself doing things. Abstract thoughts give way to more concrete, action-oriented imagery. Your ability to think logically deteriorates during hypnagogia. The part of your brain responsible for executive function, critical thinking, and logical analysis, your prefrontal cortex, is among the first areas to significantly reduce activity as sleep approaches. With its influence diminished, your thoughts become more associative, more dreamlike. Ideas connect in ways that would seem absurd or nonsensical during full wakefulness. But in the hypnagogic state, these strange associations feel perfectly natural and even meaningful. This loosening of logical constraints is one reason why hypnagogia has been associated with creative insights and problem solving. Throughout history, artists, scientists, and inventors have reported experiencing moments of inspiration during this transitional state. Thomas Edison famously used to take brief naps while holding steel balls in his hands. When he fell asleep and his muscles relaxed, the balls would drop with a clang, waking him up while he was still in the hypnagogic state, allowing him to capture any creative ideas that had emerged. Salvador Dali used a similar technique with a key and a metal plate. Modern research has confirmed that the hypnagogic state can indeed enhance certain types of creative problem solving. A 2021 study found that people who were awakened during the transition to sleep were better able to solve mathematical puzzles that required a hidden shortcut. The key seemed to be maintaining awareness during the hypnagogic state without falling into deeper sleep. This sweet spot between wakefulness and sleep, where logical constraints are loosened but consciousness remains, appears to allow the brain to make connections and perceive solutions that aren't accessible during normal waking thought. The hypnagogic state can also involve a phenomenon called sleep paralysis, which, while it most commonly occurs when waking up, can also happen during the transition into sleep. Sleep paralysis is exactly what it sounds like: a temporary inability to move or speak while you're aware. It occurs when the brain mechanisms that normally paralyze your muscles during REM sleep to prevent you from acting out your dreams activate while you're still conscious. The experience can be frightening, especially since it's often accompanied by a sense of presence, a feeling that someone or something is in the room with you. Some researchers believe that many reports of supernatural encounters, alien abductions, and demonic visitations might actually be experiences of sleep paralysis combined with hypnagogic hallucinations. For most people, hypnagogia is a brief state lasting anywhere from a few seconds to a few minutes before they transition into stage 1 sleep. However, some individuals, particularly those with certain sleep disorders or those who are very skilled at maintaining awareness during the sleep transition, can prolong the hypnagogic state. This ability is related to the practice of lucid dreaming, where the dreamer maintains awareness that they're dreaming during actual sleep. The hypnagogic state demonstrates something profound about consciousness itself. It shows us that awareness doesn't simply switch off when we sleep. Instead, it transforms gradually, passing through intermediate states that have their own unique qualities. It reveals that the boundary between waking and sleeping consciousness isn't a sharp line, but rather a gradual transition zone where the two states blend and overlap, creating experiences that partake of both but belong fully to neither. Physical transformations. The body's journey to sleep. While all these fascinating changes are occurring in your brain, your body is undergoing its own remarkable transformation. The transition to sleep isn't just a mental event. It's a comprehensive physiological shift that affects nearly every system in your body. Understanding these physical changes helps illuminate why certain conditions make falling asleep easier or harder, and why the quality of this transition can affect the quality of your entire night's sleep. Let's start with one of the most fundamental changes: your core body temperature. Throughout the day, your temperature has followed a predictable pattern, controlled by your circadian rhythm. It typically peaks in the late afternoon or early evening, then begins a gradual decline that continues through the night, reaching its lowest point in the early morning hours, typically around 2 to 4 a.m. This temperature decline isn't just correlated with sleep. It's actually one of the signals your body uses to determine when it's time to sleep. As you lie in bed preparing for sleep, your core temperature is dropping, typically by about 1 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit over the course of the night. This decline begins before you even get into bed. In fact, the steepest drop in temperature often coincides with the time when people feel most inclined to go to sleep. Studies where people were allowed to choose their own bedtime found that they most often selected the moment when their body temperature was dropping most rapidly. But here's something fascinating. While your core temperature is dropping, the temperature of your skin, particularly in your hands and feet, is rising. This might seem counterintuitive, but it's actually the mechanism by which your core temperature drops. Your body is redistributing heat from your core to your extremities, where it can be released to the environment. This redistribution happens through a process called vasodilation, where blood vessels in your skin, particularly in your hands and feet, expand, allowing more warm blood to flow near the surface where heat can radiate away. The difference in temperature between your proximal skin, the skin on your torso, and your distal skin, the skin on your hands and feet, is actually one of the best predictors of how quickly you will fall asleep. The greater the distal to proximal temperature gradient, meaning the warmer your hands and feet are relative to your core, the faster you'll typically fall asleep. This is why, paradoxically, warming your feet can actually help you fall asleep faster. It promotes this temperature gradient that signals to your body that it's time to sleep. People who have difficulty with peripheral vasodilation, such as those with certain circulatory disorders, often have more difficulty falling asleep. Their bodies struggle to redistribute heat effectively, which interferes with the temperature signals that promote sleep onset. This is also why a bedroom that's too warm can make it hard to fall asleep. Your body needs to shed heat to lower its core temperature, and a hot environment makes this difficult. Your cardiovascular system undergoes significant changes as you transition to sleep. Your heart rate, which has been variable throughout the day depending on your activities and emotions, begins to slow and stabilize. The variability in time between heartbeats, known as heart rate variability, follows a specific pattern. During wakefulness, your heart rate is influenced by both branches of your autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic branch, which speeds it up, and the parasympathetic branch, which slows it down. As you approach sleep, there's a shift toward parasympathetic dominance. This shift is mediated in part by your vagus nerve, a major nerve that runs from your brainstem to your heart and other organs. As your vagus nerve becomes more active and sympathetic activity decreases, your heart rate slows. The decline in heart rate begins even before you fall asleep and continues as you transition into the first stages of sleep. For most adults, the heart rate during sleep is about 20 to 30% slower than during relaxed wakefulness, though this varies considerably between individuals. Your blood pressure follows a similar pattern. Throughout the day, your blood pressure rises and falls in response to activity, stress, posture changes, and various other factors. As you settle into bed and begin to relax, your blood pressure starts to drop. This nighttime dip in blood pressure is actually an important marker of cardiovascular health. People who don't experience this normal nocturnal dip, often called non-dippers, have a higher risk of cardiovascular problems. The blood pressure decline is driven by the same autonomic nervous system changes that affect heart rate, plus additional factors like the horizontal position of your body and the general relaxation of your muscles. Speaking of muscles, the process of muscle relaxation during sleep onset is fascinating and in some ways mysterious. Your muscles have been under varying degrees of tension all day, maintaining your posture, enabling your movements, and responding to your environment. As sleep approaches, this muscle tone gradually decreases. The technical term is hypotonia, a reduction in muscle tone, and it happens progressively as you move through the stages of sleep. During the transition to sleep, your muscles are in a state of flux. They are relaxing but not yet fully released from voluntary control. This is the state where hypnic jerks can occur, those sudden muscle contractions that can feel like a jolt or a sensation of falling. These jerks represent a kind of miscommunication as control of your muscles transitions from voluntary to involuntary systems. In most cases, the transition is smooth, but occasionally the handoff is bumpy, resulting in that sudden contraction. Your breathing also changes in characteristic ways as you fall asleep. During wakefulness, your breathing pattern is quite variable, influenced by speech, emotions, physical activity, and conscious control. You can deliberately breathe faster or slower, deeper or more shallowly. But as sleep approaches, your breathing comes under more automatic control, regulated primarily by chemoreceptors in your brainstem that monitor carbon dioxide and oxygen levels in your blood. As you enter the first stage of sleep, your breathing becomes more regular and slightly slower. The conscious override that allows you to adjust your breathing patterns fades away. Your respiratory rate decreases modestly, and your breathing becomes more rhythmic, more mechanical in its precision. This regularity actually increases as you move into deeper sleep stages, though it will become variable again when you eventually enter REM sleep hours later. Interestingly, your cough reflex is largely suppressed during sleep. This is why people rarely cough during the night unless they have a significant respiratory condition. The brain mechanisms that trigger coughing are inhibited as part of the overall reduction in responsiveness to various stimuli. This makes evolutionary sense. Coughing frequently during sleep would disrupt rest. So, unless there's a significant threat requiring clearing the airways, the reflex is held in check. Your eyes also undergo changes as you fall asleep. During wakefulness, you make frequent, rapid eye movements, scanning your environment, following objects, reading, looking at faces. As you close your eyes and begin to relax, these movements slow and eventually stop. During the hypnagogic state, you might make occasional slow rolling eye movements, different from both waking eye movements and the rapid eye movements that will characterize REM sleep later in the night. These slow rolling eye movements are one of the markers that sleep researchers look for to identify the transition from wakefulness to sleep. Your sensory systems, the gateways through which information about the world reaches your brain, begin to disconnect from external input. This doesn't happen all at once or uniformly across all senses. Instead, different sensory modalities show different patterns of disconnection. Your sensitivity to sounds decreases, but not uniformly, across all sound frequencies or types. You might still respond to certain sounds like your name being called or a baby crying, while other sounds of similar volume go unnoticed. This selective attention, even during the sleep transition, reflects the brain's continuing prioritization of potentially important information. Your sense of your body's position and boundaries becomes less precise. Proprioception, the sense that tells you where your limbs are in space without having to look, begins to blur. This is part of why hypnagogic experiences can include strange sensations of floating, shrinking, expanding, or having distorted body dimensions. The normally stable representation your brain maintains of your physical form and position is becoming less stable. One subtle but important change involves your body's fluid systems. Your kidneys, which have been producing urine throughout the day, slow down their production at night. This is mediated by hormonal changes, particularly an increase in antidiuretic hormone, which tells your kidneys to conserve water. This reduction in urine production is why healthy individuals can sleep through the night without needing to urinate, though this capacity can be disrupted by various factors, including age, medical conditions, or drinking too much fluid close to bedtime. Your digestive system also enters a different mode during sleep. The rhythmic contractions that move food through your intestines slow down, though they don't stop entirely. Your stomach's production of acid decreases. Salivary glands reduce their output, which is why you wake up with a dry mouth if you sleep with your mouth open. The reduction in saliva production also means that your mouth's natural protective mechanisms against bacteria are reduced, which is one reason why dental health professionals emphasize the importance of brushing before bed. Hormone production throughout your body shifts dramatically during the transition to sleep and throughout the night. We've already mentioned melatonin and antidiuretic hormone, but many other hormones follow sleep-related patterns. Growth hormone, crucial for tissue repair and growth, has its primary release shortly after sleep onset. Cortisol, often called the stress hormone, drops to its lowest levels in the first half of the night, then begins to rise in the early morning hours, helping to prepare your body for waking. All of these physical changes are orchestrated in concert, creating a comprehensive physiological state that's fundamentally different from wakefulness. Your Your body is preparing for the work of sleep, which, contrary to what you might think, is far from passive. During sleep, your body will engage in crucial repair work, immune system maintenance, metabolic regulation, and countless other processes that can only happen efficiently when the demands of waking consciousness aren't competing for resources. Brainwave patterns, the electrical symphony of sleep. Onset. If we could observe your brain's electrical activity during the transition to sleep, we would witness a remarkable transformation in the patterns of neural firing. This electrical activity, which can be measured through electroencephalography or EEG, provides one of the most objective ways to define the boundary between wakefulness and sleep. Understanding these brainwave changes helps us appreciate the profound shift in neural organization that accompanies falling asleep. During relaxed wakefulness, particularly when you're sitting quietly with your eyes closed, your brain produces a distinctive pattern called alpha waves. These oscillations cycle at a frequency of about 8 to 13 times per second, creating a rhythmic pattern that's most prominent in the back of your brain, in the visual areas of your cortex. Alpha waves represent a kind of idling state for your brain, a baseline hum of activity that dominates when you're awake, but not actively engaged in demanding mental tasks. As you begin the transition to sleep, these alpha waves start to disappear, replaced gradually by slower oscillations called theta waves. Theta waves cycle at about 4 to 8 times per second, roughly half the frequency of alpha waves. This shift from faster to slower oscillations reflects a fundamental change in how populations of neurons are firing. During wakefulness, neurons across your cortex fire in relatively independent, desynchronized patterns. As sleep approaches, they begin to fire in larger, more synchronized groups, creating these slower, larger amplitude waves. The definition that sleep researchers use for the official beginning of sleep, the transition from wakefulness to stage 1 NREM sleep, is based largely on these brainwave changes. Sleep onset is typically defined as the moment when alpha waves have been absent for more than 50% of a 30-second recording epoch, replaced by slower frequency activity. This might seem like an arbitrary definition, and in some ways it is, but it represents a measurable point in a continuous process, a way of putting a marker on a gradual transition. But the transition isn't uniform across your entire brain. Different brain regions don't all fall asleep at exactly the same time. Modern neuroimaging techniques have revealed that sleep onset is more like a wave spreading across your cortex than a single unified event. Some areas, particularly in your frontal cortex, begin showing sleep-like patterns of activity before other areas. These frontal regions, involved in executive control, attention, and working memory, are often the first to go offline. Meanwhile, more posterior regions of your brain, particularly areas involved in processing sensory information, may continue showing wake-like activity for some time after the frontal areas have transitioned to sleep patterns. This uneven transition might explain some of the strange experiences of hypnagogia. Parts of your brain are asleep while others remain awake, creating a mixed state where dreamlike experiences can intrude into waking consciousness, or where fragments of waking awareness persist into early sleep. The thalamus, a structure deep in your brain that serves as a relay station for sensory information, plays a crucial role in this transition. During wakefulness, your thalamus actively transmits sensory information from your eyes, ears, skin, and other sense organs to your cortex. As sleep approaches, neurons in your thalamus begin firing in a different mode. Instead of faithfully transmitting every incoming signal, they start to generate their own rhythmic bursts of activity. These thalamic bursts help create sleep spindles, distinctive patterns of brain waves that are one of the hallmarks of stage 2 sleep. though they can sometimes appear even in stage 1. Sleep spindles are brief bursts of activity at a frequency of about 12 to 16 times per second, lasting a second or two. They represent thalamic neurons firing in synchronized bursts, creating ripples of activity that spread across the cortex. These spindles are thought to play an important role in protecting sleep from disruption and in memory consolidation. Another important pattern that begins to appear as you transition into sleep are slow waves, also called delta waves, which cycle at less than 4 times per second. These very slow oscillations won't dominate until you reach deep sleep in stage 3, but they may begin appearing occasionally even during the transition to sleep. Slow waves represent massive synchronization of neural activity, with large populations of neurons firing and then falling silent in coordinated patterns. They reflect the cortex's ability to enter states of very high synchronization, very different from the desynchronized, independent firing that characterizes wakefulness. The generation of these different brainwave patterns involves complex interactions between your cortex and subcortical structures. It's not simply that your cortex slows down, rather different neural circuits come online. Circuits specialized for generating the rhythmic patterns characteristic of sleep. In your thalamus, in your brainstem, and in your cortex itself, there are populations of neurons that act as pacemakers. Neurons whose intrinsic properties allow them to fire rhythmically and to synchronize the activity of other neurons around them. These pacemaker neurons can switch between different modes of firing depending on the chemical environment they're in, which is determined by the neurotransmitters we discussed earlier. When wake-promoting neurotransmitters are present, these neurons fire in a tonic mode, producing steady trains of action potentials. When sleep-promoting neurotransmitters dominate, they switch to a burst mode, firing in rhythmic clusters that help generate sleep spindles and slow waves. The transition in brainwave patterns isn't just a passive consequence of falling asleep. These patterns actively contribute to the process and quality of sleep. The sleep spindles that appear during light sleep, for instance, are thought to help block external sensory information from reaching higher cortical areas, essentially gating off your awareness from the outside world. The more spindles you produce during sleep, particularly in the first few sleep cycles, the better you tend to sleep through external noise and disruptions. Researchers have also discovered that brainwave patterns during sleep onset can predict various aspects of cognitive performance and mental health. People who show more rapid transitions from alpha to theta activity tend to report feeling more refreshed upon waking. The characteristics of sleep spindles, their frequency, duration, and density correlate with measures of intelligence and learning ability. Abnormalities in the brainwave patterns during sleep onset are associated with various sleep disorders and psychiatric conditions, suggesting that the electrical dynamics of falling asleep are intimately connected to both physical and mental health. What's particularly fascinating is that these brainwave patterns aren't random or meaningless electrical noise. They represent specific computational states of your brain, different modes of information processing. The desynchronized activity of wakefulness allows for rapid, flexible processing of diverse inputs and complex cognitive operations. The synchronized rhythmic patterns of sleep represent a shift to a different type of processing, one that's optimized for memory consolidation, synaptic homeostasis, and neural maintenance rather than interaction with the external world. During the hypnagogic state, when you're poised between wakefulness and sleep, your brain waves show a mixture of patterns, sometimes rapidly alternating between wake-like and sleep-like activity. This instability is why the hypnagogic state is so brief for most people. Your brain naturally tends toward one state or the other, and the mixed state is inherently unstable. It's like a ball balanced on the peak of a hill. the slightest perturbation will send it rolling down one side or the other. Environmental factors can influence these brainwave patterns during the transition to sleep. Certain types of sounds, particularly rhythmic sounds or white noise, can help facilitate the transition by promoting the generation of sleep-promoting brain rhythms. This is one reason why many people find sounds like rain, ocean waves, or fans helpful for falling asleep. These sounds may help entrain or synchronize neural rhythms in ways that facilitate the transition to sleep. Conversely, certain types of stimulation can disrupt the transition. Blue light from screens, by suppressing melatonin and stimulating wake-promoting brain regions, can prevent the normal progression of brainwave changes. Mental stimulation, worry, or excitement can maintain desynchronized wake-like brain activity patterns, preventing the emergence of the synchronized rhythms characteristic of sleep. This is why practicing relaxation techniques, clearing your mind, and avoiding stimulating activities before bed all help facilitate sleep onset. They allow your brain to shift into the electrical patterns that define sleep. Memory processing begins. The early work of sleep. Even during these first moments of sleep, long before you enter the deeper stages where the most intensive memory consolidation occurs, your brain is already beginning its nightly work of processing and organizing the information you've acquired during the day. Understanding what happens to memories during sleep onset helps illuminate why even a brief period of light sleep can feel restorative, and why disruptions to this transition can affect cognitive performance the next day. As you drift from wakefulness into stage 1 sleep, communication patterns between different brain regions begin to change dramatically. During wakefulness, your hippocampus, a seahorse-shaped structure deep in your temporal lobe that's crucial for forming new memories, is actively encoding new experiences. Every significant event, every new piece of information, every learned skill creates patterns of activity in your hippocampus. These patterns are like temporary sketches, rough drafts of memories that need to be refined and stored more permanently. But here's the challenge. Your hippocampus has limited storage capacity. If memories remained only in the hippocampus, it would quickly become saturated, unable to encode new experiences. The solution evolution has devised is a system of memory consolidation, where information temporarily stored in the hippocampus is gradually transferred to your cortex, the brain's outer layer, where it can be stored more permanently and integrated with your existing knowledge. This transfer process begins remarkably early in sleep, even during the light sleep of stages 1 and 2. Research using sophisticated neuroimaging techniques has shown that even during these early sleep stages, there's increased communication between the hippocampus and various cortical regions. The hippocampus essentially replays the patterns of activity that occurred during the day's experiences, reactivating the memory traces it holds. These reactivations then ripple outward to the cortex, helping to strengthen and stabilize the memory representations there. This replay happens at a much faster speed than the original experiences. Events that took minutes or hours to unfold during the day are replayed in the hippocampus in just seconds or fractions of a second during sleep. This time-compressed replay is thought to be important for extracting the essential features of experiences and integrating them with existing memories. It's like watching a time-lapse video that highlights the key moments and patterns while leaving out the irrelevant details. The replay isn't random. Your brain seems to prioritize certain types of memories for early processing. Memories that are tagged as important either because they were emotionally significant or because you deliberately tried to remember them show more replay than mundane memories. Memories related to rewards or to learning new skills also show enhanced replay. Your brain is intelligent about how it allocates its limited consolidation resources, focusing on information that's most likely to be useful in the future. Interestingly, the replay doesn't always follow the same sequence as the original experience. Sometimes events are replayed backward or in jumbled orders. Researchers believe this non-sequential replay might serve important functions, perhaps allowing the brain to discover relationships between events that weren't obvious when they occurred in real time, or to integrate new information with existing memory structures in creative ways. Even during the transition to sleep, before you fully entered even stage 1 sleep, there's evidence that memory consolidations processes are beginning to engage. Studies have shown that very brief periods of drowsiness, lasting just a few minutes, can enhance memory for recently learned information. This suggests that even the earliest moments of the sleep onset process involve the activation of consolidation mechanisms. One particularly fascinating phenomenon that occurs during early sleep is the emergence of sharp wave ripples in the hippocampus. These are brief, high-frequency bursts of neural activity that look like ripples on an EEG recording. They last only about 100 milliseconds, but are associated with the replay of memory sequences at very high speed. During waking rest and light sleep, the hippocampus can generate these sharp wave ripples at a rate of several per minute, each one potentially replaying a different memory sequence. These ripples are coordinated with sleep spindles, those brief bursts of rhythmic activity generated by the thalamus that we discussed earlier. When a sharp wave ripple in the hippocampus coincides with a sleep spindle in the cortex, it seems to create an optimal window for memory transfer. The ripple is reactivating the memory trace in the hippocampus, while the spindle is preparing cortical neurons to receive and encode this information. It's a beautifully orchestrated dialogue between different brain regions, all happening automatically while you're unconscious. The content that gets processed during this early sleep isn't just factual information or episodic memories of events. Motor skills, the kind of procedural knowledge involved in playing an instrument, typing, or performing athletic movements, also show evidence of consolidation during light sleep. Studies have demonstrated that even short naps can improve performance on motor learning tasks. And the improvement correlates with the amount of stage 2 sleep obtained, particularly with the density of sleep spindles. Emotional memories receive special treatment during sleep onset and early sleep. Your amygdala, the brain structure most involved in processing emotions, shows altered connectivity patterns during the transition to sleep. Emotionally significant memories seem to be preferentially replayed and consolidated. This might be part of why we sometimes ruminate on emotional events as we're falling asleep. These memories are being reactivated as part of the consolidation process. Over multiple sleep cycles, this reactivation helps to integrate emotional experiences into our long-term autobiographical memory. Interestingly, the consolidation process isn't just about strengthening memories, it's also about weakening or eliminating them. Sleep involves what's called synaptic homeostasis or synaptic downscaling. Throughout the day, as you learn and experience new things, synapses, the connections between neurons, are strengthened. If this strengthening continued unchecked, synapses would eventually reach their maximum strength. Neurons would become saturated, and new learning would become impossible. Sleep provides an opportunity for the brain to downscale synaptic strengths, to prune away connections that aren't important while preserving those that are. This isn't a random process, but a selective one. Synapses that are part of important memory traces are protected from downscaling, while those that represent irrelevant noise are weakened. This pruning is thought to begin even during light sleep, though it becomes more intensive during deep, slow-wave sleep later in the night. The evidence for this synaptic downscaling comes from multiple sources. Brain imaging studies show that during sleep, particularly deep sleep, there's a decrease in the overall level of synaptic activity. Molecular studies have found that proteins involved in synaptic weakening are more active during sleep. Even the size of brain waves during sleep shows patterns consistent with overall synaptic downscaling, with individual neurons becoming more responsive after a night of sleep, consistent with their synapses having been reset to a more sensitive baseline. This dual process of selective strengthening and general downscaling gives sleep a crucial role in learning and memory. It's not just about storing information, but about organizing it, separating signal from noise, extracting general principles from specific experiences, and maintaining the brain's capacity to keep learning. Even the light sleep stages that dominate the transition to sleep in the first sleep cycles contribute to these processes. The implications for daily life are significant. The quality of your sleep onset, how smoothly and completely you transition from wakefulness to sleep, can affect how well memories are consolidated. Disrupted or fragmented sleep onset, where you repeatedly drift towards sleep but bounce back into wakefulness, can interfere with these early consolidation processes. This might explain why people with insomnia, even if they eventually get a reasonable total amount of sleep, often report cognitive difficulties. The consolidation processes that should be engaging smoothly at sleep onset are repeatedly interrupted. The sleep cycle architecture, your night's blueprint. Once you've successfully navigated the transition from wakefulness through stage 1 sleep, you've entered what will become a repeating cycle of sleep stages that will structure your entire night. Understanding this architecture helps place the sleep onset transition in its proper context as the gateway to a complex, organized process that your brain navigates automatically across the hours of sleep. Stage 1. Sleep, which you first enter shortly after falling asleep, is a brief transitional stage, typically lasting only a few minutes in the first sleep cycle. It's the lightest stage of sleep, characterized by those theta waves we discussed, slower than alpha waves, but faster than the deeper sleep stages to come. During stage 1, you're easily awakened, and if someone woke you, you might not even realize you'd been asleep. You might report that you were just resting your eyes, or just thinking. From stage 1, assuming you're not disturbed, you'll progress into stage 2 sleep, which is still relatively light but represents a deeper level of sleep than stage 1. Stage 2 is where those sleep spindles become prominent and where another wave pattern called K complexes begins to appear. K complexes are single, sharp peaks in the EEG that look a bit like the letter K, hence the name. They appear to be a response to stimuli, possibly helping to maintain sleep in the presence of potentially disturbing sounds or sensations by inhibiting awakening. Stage 2 typically lasts longer than stage 1, perhaps 15 to 20 minutes in the first cycle, though this varies considerably between individuals. During this stage, you're less responsive to your environment than in stage 1. It takes a louder sound or a stronger stimulus to wake you. Your body temperature continues to drop, your heart rate stabilizes at its lower sleeping level, and your muscles are quite relaxed, though not yet fully released from all tension. After stage 2 in the first cycle of the night, you'll typically progress into stage 3, also known as slow wave sleep or deep sleep. This is characterized by the dominance of those very slow, large amplitude delta waves we mentioned earlier. In this stage, you're profoundly unresponsive to your environment. It takes quite loud noises or vigorous shaking to wake someone from deep sleep. And when awakened from this stage, people are typically disoriented and confused, taking several minutes to fully regain alertness. Deep sleep is when your body does much of its physical repair and restoration. Growth hormone is secreted, tissues are repaired, immune function is enhanced, and energy stores are replenished. The slow waves that characterize this stage represent massive synchronization of cortical activity, and are associated with the most intensive synaptic downscaling and memory consolidation. The first episode of deep sleep in the night is typically the longest and deepest, lasting perhaps 30 to 60 minutes, though again with considerable individual variation. After this first episode of deep sleep, rather than proceeding to an even deeper stage, you'll cycle back up through lighter sleep stages, eventually entering REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, the stage most associated with vivid dreaming. This first REM period is typically brief, perhaps only 5 to 10 minutes, but it marks the completion of the first sleep cycle, which has taken roughly 90 to 110 minutes from the initial transition into stage 1, sleep. This cycle then repeats with modifications throughout the night. In subsequent cycles, you spend less time in deep sleep and more time in REM sleep. By the final sleep cycles of the night, you might not enter deep sleep at all, instead alternating between stage 2 and REM sleep. This shift in the proportion of different sleep stages across the night is called the sleep cycle architecture, and it's remarkably consistent across individuals. The details vary based on age, sleep debt, circadian timing, and other factors. The total architecture of your night contains typically 4 to 6 complete cycles, each lasting roughly 90 minutes but ranging from 70 to 120 minutes. The exact number depends on how long you sleep, with most adults needing about 7 to 9 hours to complete an adequate number of cycles for optimal restoration. If you are awakened in the middle of a cycle, particularly if yanked out of deep sleep or REM sleep, you'll feel much groggier than if you wake naturally at the end of a cycle during light sleep. This is why some sleep tracking devices try to wake you during light sleep phases rather than at an arbitrary time. Age dramatically affects sleep architecture. Infants spend much more time in REM sleep than adults, sometimes as much as 50% of their sleep time, compared to about 20 to 25% for adults. Elderly individuals tend to have less deep sleep and more fragmented sleep with more frequent awakenings. The changes in sleep architecture across the lifespan reflect changing brain organization and different needs at different life stages. The transition into sleep that we've been exploring is thus the gateway to this entire structured process. The quality of this transition can affect the quality of the entire night's sleep. A smooth, rapid transition that efficiently moves through stage 1 into stage 2 and then into deep sleep sets the stage for optimal sleep cycles. A disrupted transition where you repeatedly fall into light sleep only to be pulled back into wakefulness can compromise the entire architecture, preventing you from reaching deeper sleep stages or reducing the amount of time spent there. Circadian timing also interacts with sleep architecture in important ways. Your circadian rhythm doesn't just tell you when to sleep, it modulates the characteristics of sleep throughout the night. Deep sleep is promoted by homeostatic sleep pressure, that buildup of adenosine and sleep need that accumulates during waking. But REM sleep is promoted more by circadian timing, tending to occur more in the early morning hours when your circadian rhythm reaches certain phases. This is why the timing of sleep matters, not just the duration. Sleeping at the wrong circadian time can lead to altered sleep architecture that doesn't provide the same restorative benefits. Sleep disorders often manifest as disruptions to normal sleep architecture. Sleep apnea, where breathing repeatedly stops during sleep, fragments sleep cycles, and prevents normal progression through stages. Narcolepsy involves intrusions of REM sleep into wakefulness and abnormal transitions between sleep stages. Insomnia, particularly sleep onset insomnia, is fundamentally a disorder of the transition we've been exploring, an inability to smoothly shift from wakefulness into sleep. Even within normal sleep, there can be considerable night-to-night variability in architecture. Stress, illness, medications, alcohol consumption, ambient temperature, and numerous other factors can all affect how you progress through sleep stages. One night you might have very deep, slow wave sleep. Another night, more fragmented, lighter sleep. Your brain is constantly adapting the structure of your sleep to current conditions and current needs. The cyclical nature of sleep, this repeating pattern of stages across the night, reveals something fundamental about how the brain organizes the maintenance processes that occur during sleep. Different stages seem to serve different functions. Deep sleep appears optimized for physical restoration and certain types of memory consolidation, particularly for declarative memories. REM sleep seems crucial for emotional regulation, procedural memory consolidation, and possibly for creativity and problem solving. Stage 2 sleep, with its spindles, appears important for motor learning and protecting sleep from disruption. Even brief stage 1 sleep can facilitate memory processing. By repeating these stages in cycles, your brain ensures that all these functions are accomplished multiple times throughout the night, providing redundancy and allowing for progressive, incremental processing. Memories can be consolidated in stages. Emotions can be processed gradually, and physical restoration can occur in multiple waves. The architecture isn't arbitrary, but reflects deep evolutionary optimization for the varied needs that sleep must serve. Why sleep onset matters. Implications for health and performance. The transition from wakefulness to sleep, which might seem like a mere prelude to the real business of sleeping, actually has profound implications for both the quality of your sleep and your overall health and functioning. Understanding why this transition matters helps explain why so much clinical and research attention is focused on sleep onset, and why difficulties with falling asleep are taken so seriously by sleep medicine specialists. First and most obviously, the quality of your sleep onset determines whether you sleep at all. For people with sleep onset insomnia, the inability to make this transition efficiently can mean spending hours lying awake in bed, experiencing mounting frustration and anxiety that makes sleep even less likely. This creates a vicious cycle where worry about not sleeping produces arousal that prevents sleep, which increases worry, which produces more arousal. Over time, even the bedroom itself can become a conditioned stimulus for wakefulness rather than sleep, as the brain learns to associate lying in bed with the frustration of not sleeping. The consequences of chronic sleep onset difficulties extend far beyond the nighttime frustration. People with sleep onset insomnia often develop sleep deprivation, as they either spend excessive time awake or reduce their time in bed to match their actual sleep time. Even when they do eventually fall asleep, the quality of their sleep may be compromised. The anxiety and hyperarousal associated with insomnia don't simply vanish once sleep is achieved. They can persist into sleep itself, leading to lighter, more fragmented sleep with more frequent awakenings. The time it takes to fall asleep, called sleep onset latency, in research and clinical settings, varies considerably among individuals. On average, healthy adults fall asleep within 10 to 20 minutes of getting into bed with the intention to sleep. Falling asleep much faster than this, say within 5 minutes, can actually indicate excessive sleepiness or sleep deprivation. You're not falling asleep quickly because you're a good sleeper, but because you're not getting enough sleep. Conversely, taking more than 30 to 45 minutes to fall asleep on a regular basis is often considered problematic and may warrant clinical evaluation. The factors that influence sleep onset latency are numerous and complex. Your circadian rhythm creates windows of opportunity for sleep, times when your biology is prepared for the transition. Trying to fall asleep outside these windows, whether because of shift work, jet lag, or simply attempting to sleep at an unusual time, makes the transition much more difficult. Your homeostatic sleep drive, that accumulation of adenosine and sleep pressure we discussed, also plays a crucial role. If you're not sufficiently tired, not enough sleep pressure has built up, the transition will be difficult. Psychological factors are equally important. Anxiety, whether specifically about sleep or about other life concerns, can prevent the mental quieting necessary for sleep onset. Rumination, that repetitive focus on problems or worries, keeps wake-promoting brain systems active and prevents the shift to sleep-promoting patterns. Depression often causes sleep disturbances, sometimes manifesting as difficulty falling asleep, but more often as early morning awakening or unrefreshing sleep despite normal duration. The environment plays a crucial role in facilitating or hindering sleep onset. The ideal sleep environment is dark, quiet, and cool. Light, especially blue light from screens, suppresses melatonin production and signals to your circadian system that it's daytime, making the transition to sleep difficult. Noise can prevent sleep onset both by causing arousal directly and by preventing the mental quieting necessary for sleep. A warm environment makes it difficult for your body to achieve the core temperature decline that facilitates sleep. Behavioral factors and habits significantly impact sleep onset. Regular sleep-wake schedules help align your circadian rhythm and build consistent sleep pressure. Exercise earlier in the day can promote better sleep that night, though exercise too close to bedtime can be alerting. Caffeine consumption, particularly in the afternoon or evening, blocks adenosine receptors and interferes with sleep pressure. Alcohol, while it may initially make you drowsy, disrupts sleep architecture later in the night and can impair sleep quality. Screen time before bed has become one of the most common modern sleep disruptors. Beyond the blue light issue, screens engage your mind, promote alertness, and can expose you to stimulating or emotionally arousing content right when you should be winding down. Social media, email, news, and entertainment all compete with sleep, not just for your time, but for your mental state. The simple act of checking your phone in bed can condition your brain to associate the bedroom with wakeful activity rather than sleep. The relationship between sleep onset and daytime functioning is bidirectional and complex. Good sleep, which requires efficient sleep onset, supports cognitive performance, emotional regulation, physical health, and overall well-being the next day. These daytime benefits then make the subsequent night's sleep onset easier by reducing stress, anxiety, and excessive arousal. Conversely, poor sleep onset leads to inadequate or poor quality sleep, which impairs next day functioning, which can make the following night's sleep onset even more difficult. Chronic difficulties with sleep onset have been linked to numerous health outcomes. There's an association between insomnia and increased risk of depression, anxiety disorders, substance use disorders, and suicide. Sleep problems can precede, accompany, or follow other mental health difficulties, and there's ongoing debate about the causal relationships involved. What's clear is that treating sleep problems can often improve mental health outcomes, suggesting that sleep difficulties aren't just symptoms, but can themselves drive or maintain psychological problems. Physical health consequences of chronic sleep onset difficulties and insomnia include increased risk of cardiovascular disease, hypertension, diabetes, obesity, and weakened immune function. Some of these relationships are mediated by the sleep loss that results from prolonged sleep onset latency. But there's also evidence that the hyperarousal state associated with insomnia itself, independent of sleep duration, may have negative health effects through effects on the hypothalamic pituitary, adrenal axis, and inflammatory processes. The good news is that sleep onset difficulties are often treatable. Cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBTI, is considered the first-line treatment and has been shown to be highly effective in multiple controlled trials. This therapy addresses the thoughts, behaviors, and habits that perpetuate insomnia, helping people re-establish normal sleep patterns without medication. Techniques include sleep restriction, stimulus control, cognitive restructuring, and relaxation training. Pharmacological treatments are also available, though they are generally recommended for short-term use or when behavioral treatments haven't been sufficient. Medications that enhance the effects of GABA, like benzodiazepines or newer drugs called the Z drugs, can facilitate sleep onset. Melatonin or melatonin receptor agonists can be helpful, particularly for circadian rhythm-related sleep onset difficulties. Certain antidepressants with sedating properties are sometimes used. Each of these approaches has benefits and potential drawbacks that need to be weighed carefully in consultation with healthcare providers. Beyond clinical treatments, there are numerous evidence-based strategies that individuals can employ to improve sleep onset. Maintaining a consistent sleep schedule, even on weekends, helps align your circadian rhythm. Creating a relaxing pre-sleep routine signals to your brain that it's time to wind down. Making your bedroom comfortable, dark, and quiet optimizes the sleep environment. Avoiding caffeine, heavy meals, and vigorous exercise close to bedtime reduces arousal. Managing stress and anxiety through techniques like meditation, progressive muscle relaxation, or journaling can quiet the worried mind that prevents sleep onset. The cognitive technique known as paradoxical intention, where you try to stay awake rather than trying to fall asleep, can be surprisingly effective by removing the performance anxiety associated with trying to sleep. Cognitive techniques that redirect attention away from worries and toward neutral or pleasant imagery can prevent the rumination that maintains wakefulness. Even simple breathing exercises that activate the parasympathetic nervous system can facilitate the physiological changes that promote sleep onset. Understanding your own sleep patterns and what affects them can be empowering. Some people are naturally evening types, whose circadian rhythms make them alert later into the night and groggy in the morning. Forcing such people to go to bed very early and wake very early fights against their biology. Other people are morning types, ready for sleep earlier in the evening and naturally waking early. Working with your chronotype rather than against it, when life circumstances allow, can make sleep onset much easier. Age-related changes in sleep onset should also be understood and accommodated rather than fought against. Older adults often find they can't fall asleep as late as they did when younger, and they wake earlier in the morning. This is a normal change in circadian rhythms with aging, not necessarily a sleep disorder. Adjusting sleep schedules to match these biological changes can improve both sleep quality and daytime functioning. For parents of infants and young children, understanding normal developmental sleep patterns can reduce anxiety and help establish healthy sleep habits. Newborns don't have established circadian rhythms and sleep in short bouts around the clock. By a few months of age, circadian rhythms begin to consolidate, and babies can sleep for longer nighttime periods. Establishing consistent bedtime routines and appropriate sleep associations helps infants learn to fall asleep independently, a skill that serves them throughout childhood. The workplace and societal implications of sleep onset difficulties are also significant. Shift workers who must attempt to sleep at biologically inappropriate times often struggle with sleep onset when their circadian rhythm is signaling wakefulness. Healthcare workers, transportation workers, and emergency responders all face challenges related to irregular sleep schedules. Societal recognition of these challenges and accommodation through appropriate work scheduling, fatigue management, and support for sleep health would benefit both individual workers and public safety. In our increasingly 24-hour society, where work, entertainment, and social interaction are available at all hours, the natural rhythms that once clearly signaled bedtime have become obscured. The evening dimming of natural light that once cued melatonin production is overwhelmed by artificial lighting. The natural quieting of activity that signaled the day's end is replaced by continuous stimulation. Reclaiming healthy sleep onset in this context requires deliberate choices to create artificial boundaries and to honor biological needs even when the external environment doesn't clearly signal rest time. Closing reflections, the nightly journey. So here we are, having traveled through those extraordinary minutes when your mind releases its grip on wakefulness and allows sleep to arrive. We've explored the chemical cascade that transforms your brain state, the electrical patterns that reorganize neural firing, the physical changes that prepare your body for rest, and the early beginnings of the memory processing that will continue throughout the night. We've seen how this transition fits into the larger architecture of sleep cycles and why difficulties with this transition can affect both the night's sleep and the following day's functioning. Recent research continues to unveil the remarkable complexity of what happens when we fall asleep. Scientists using cutting-edge techniques like optogenetics, where they can control specific neurons with light, and chemogenetics, where they activate or inhibit particular brain circuits with designer drugs, are revealing that the sleep onset process involves far more intricate neural choreography than we previously imagined. The simple notion that sleep is just the absence of wakefulness has been replaced by an understanding that sleep onset is an active, orchestrated process involving numerous specialized brain circuits working in concert. One fascinating recent discovery involves the role of emotional stress in disrupting sleep onset. Researchers have identified specific neural pathways connecting emotional brain centers to arousal systems, showing how anxiety and fear can override the normal sleep-promoting mechanisms. The bed nucleus of the stria terminalis, a structure involved in sustained anxiety responses, sends signals through the deep mesencephalic nucleus to arousal centers, essentially creating a stress-to-wake circuit that can yank you back from the edge of sleep when your mind perceives threats, whether real or imagined. This helps explain why worried thoughts feel so intrusive at bedtime, and why chronic stress is one of the most common causes of insomnia. Other cutting-edge research has revealed that even light sleep, the kind you might dismiss as not real sleep, produces measurable improvements in cognitive performance. Studies monitoring thousands of neurons simultaneously in multiple brain regions have shown that brief periods of non-REM sleep cause neural activity to become more desynchronized afterward, allowing individual neurons to fire more independently. This enhanced independence translates directly into improved accuracy in processing information and better performance on visual discrimination tasks. Remarkably, researchers have even been able to reproduce these benefits artificially by applying electrical stimulation that mimics sleep's natural brain rhythms, opening possibilities for future therapies that could restore cognitive function in people unable to sleep naturally. The transitional state of sleep onset, that twilight zone between wakefulness and sleep, is receiving renewed attention from neuroscientists who recognize it as far more than just a brief gateway to sleep. Recent systematic reviews examining hundreds of studies have found that the sleep onset period involves complex dynamic changes that don't fit neatly into traditional sleep stage categories. Different brain regions transition at different rates. Consciousness doesn't simply switch off, but gradually transforms through intermediate states, and cognitive abilities shift in fascinating ways that researchers are only beginning to map. One particularly intriguing area of current investigation involves the relationship between sleep onset and creativity. Multiple studies have now confirmed that the hypnagogic state, that drowsy twilight just before sleep fully arrives, can enhance certain types of problem solving and creative insight. When people are awakened during this transitional state and immediately asked to work on puzzles or creative tasks, they often perform better than when awakened from deeper sleep or during full wakefulness. The key seems to be maintaining just enough awareness to capture the insights that emerge when logical constraints loosen, but consciousness hasn't completely dissolved. This finding lends scientific support to the strategies that inventors and artists like Thomas Edison and Salvador Dali used instinctively, deliberately seeking inspiration in the hypnagogic state. The gut-brain axis has emerged as another frontier in sleep research. Scientists have discovered bidirectional relationships between the microbiome in your intestines and your sleep patterns. The bacteria living in your gut produce neurotransmitters and metabolites that can influence brain function and sleep regulation. Sleep deprivation alters gut microbiota composition. And conversely, disrupted gut bacteria can worsen sleep quality. This connection suggests that manipulating gut microbiota through dietary changes, probiotics, or other interventions might offer novel approaches to improving sleep onset and quality, though this research is still in early stages. The field has also made progress in understanding individual differences in sleep onset. Why do some people fall asleep within minutes while others struggle for hours? Part of the answer lies in chronotypes, those inherent biological preferences that make some people naturally morning types and others evening types. But there's also growing recognition that sleep onset involves multiple overlapping regulatory systems, and variation in any of these systems can affect how quickly and smoothly someone falls asleep. Genetic factors influence the sensitivity of adenosine receptors, the activity of sleep-promoting neurons, the amplitude of circadian rhythms, and countless other aspects of sleep regulation. Understanding this biological diversity is crucial for developing personalized approaches to sleep problems rather than one-size-fits-all solutions. Modern neuroscience has also clarified how external factors interact with internal sleep mechanisms. Light exposure, particularly blue light from screens, doesn't just suppress melatonin production as was long known. It actively engages brain circuits that promote alertness and shifts the timing of your circadian clock. The effect is most pronounced in the evening hours before your normal bedtime, when your brain is most sensitive to light's phase-shifting properties. But it's not just about the wavelength of light. The timing, intensity, and duration of exposure all matter. This understanding has practical implications. Dimming lights in the evening, using software that filters blue light, or wearing amber-tinted glasses can all help facilitate the natural transition to sleep. Sound environments also influence sleep onset in ways that go beyond the obvious disruption from loud noises. Certain acoustic patterns, particularly rhythmic sounds with frequencies matching the brain waves of sleep, can actually facilitate the transition from wakefulness to sleep. This is why many people find white noise, rainfall sounds, or gentle music helpful. These sounds may help entrain neural oscillations, gently guiding brain activity towards sleep-promoting patterns. Conversely, unpredictable or intermittent sounds, even if relatively quiet, can maintain alertness by keeping threat detection systems active. Your brain evolved to monitor the auditory environment for danger even during rest, so an environment that signals safety and predictability promotes better sleep onset. Temperature regulation deserves special emphasis because it's both powerful and often overlooked. Your body's core temperature follows a circadian rhythm, and the decline in temperature as evening approaches is one of the most reliable signals that it's time to sleep. You can work with this biological reality or against it. Taking a warm bath an hour or two before bed might seem counterintuitive, but it actually helps because the subsequent cooling as you dry off and the water evaporates, amplifies your natural temperature decline. Similarly, keeping your bedroom cool around 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit for most people supports the temperature drop your body needs to initiate and maintain sleep. Warming your feet with socks while keeping the room cool creates the ideal distal proximal temperature gradient that signals sleep time to your brain. The mind's relationship with sleep onset is perhaps the most complex and clinically relevant aspect. Cognitive arousal, that racing mind full of thoughts, plans, and worries, is one of the most common barriers to falling asleep. The challenge is that trying to stop thinking doesn't work. In fact, it often makes the problem worse through a phenomenon psychologists call thought suppression rebound. When you deliberately try not to think about something, that very effort makes the unwanted thought more intrusive. The solution lies in redirecting attention rather than suppressing it. Techniques like imagery, where you create detailed mental scenes of peaceful places, or body scans, where you systematically focus attention on different parts of your body, work by occupying your mind with neutral content, leaving no room for worries without directly fighting them. Mindfulness approaches to sleep have gained scientific support. Rather than struggling against wakefulness or worrying about not sleeping, mindfulness-based interventions teach people to observe their thoughts and sensations without judgment, to notice when their mind wanders and gently redirect attention to the present moment. This stance of acceptance and non-striving paradoxically makes sleep more likely by reducing the arousal that comes from anxiety about sleep itself. Multiple clinical trials have demonstrated that mindfulness training can reduce the time it takes to fall asleep and improve overall sleep quality, often with effect sizes comparable to standard insomnia treatments. Looking toward the future, sleep medicine is moving toward more personalized, mechanistic approaches to sleep onset difficulties. Rather than treating all insomnia the same way, researchers are working to identify subtypes based on underlying mechanisms. Is the problem primarily circadian misalignment, hyperarousal, insufficient sleep, drive, maladaptive conditioning? Each of these problems suggests different interventions. Someone whose insomnia stems from anxiety-related hyperarousal might benefit most from cognitive behavioral approaches that reduce arousal and break catastrophic thought patterns. Someone with circadian misalignment might need properly timed light exposure and melatonin. Someone with conditioned arousal to the bedroom might need stimulus-controlled therapy to break the learned association between bed and wakefulness. Technological advances are also opening new possibilities for both research and treatment. Wearable devices that can monitor brain waves, heart rate variability, body movement, and other physiological signals are making it possible to study sleep onset in people's natural environments rather than just in sleep laboratories. These devices aren't yet as accurate as laboratory polysomnography, but they are improving rapidly and offer the advantage of measuring sleep across many nights, capturing the night-to-night variability that characterizes real-world sleep. In the future, such devices might provide real-time feedback, cueing relaxation techniques when they detect signs of mounting arousal, or delivering gentle sensory stimulation at optimal times to facilitate sleep onset. Brain stimulation techniques represent another frontier. Transcranial magnetic stimulation, transcranial direct current stimulation, and other non-invasive methods can modulate brain activity in targeted regions. Early research suggests that stimulation delivered during the transition to sleep at frequencies that mimic natural sleep rhythms might help facilitate sleep onset. While still experimental, these approaches could eventually offer alternatives for people who don't respond to behavioral treatments or can't tolerate medications. The recent finding that electrical stimulation mimicking sleep's neural patterns can reproduce some of sleep's cognitive benefits suggests that such interventions might not just help people fall asleep, but could enhance sleep's restorative functions. Pharmacology continues to evolve as well. The sleep medications of the future may be more targeted, affecting specific components of the sleep regulatory system, rather than broadly sedating the brain. Drugs that selectively enhance the activity of sleep-promoting neurons, that block arousal systems without causing cognitive impairment, or that strengthen circadian signals could provide more effective and safer alternatives to current sleep medications. Understanding the molecular mechanisms of sleep onset at ever finer resolution is identifying new potential drug targets. For instance, drugs that modulate orexin receptors, targeting the hypocretin system we discussed earlier, represent a new class of sleep medications with a different mechanism of action than traditional sedatives. The field is also recognizing that sleep onset problems don't exist in isolation. They're intimately connected to mental health, physical health, social rhythms, and life circumstances. Treating insomnia can improve depression outcomes. Improving sleep can enhance metabolic health and immune function. Addressing social determinants of health, like work schedules that conflict with natural sleep rhythms or environments with noise and light pollution, is increasingly recognized as essential for promoting healthy sleep. Sleep medicine is evolving toward a more holistic understanding that places sleep onset within the broader context of an individual's life. One particularly important area of future development involves prevention. Rather than waiting until people develop chronic sleep problems, there's growing interest in promoting healthy sleep habits across the lifespan, teaching children about sleep, establishing good sleep routines in families, designing work schedules that respect circadian biology, creating environments that support sleep, and addressing societal pressures that encourage sleep deprivation could all help prevent insomnia before it starts. Sleep education in schools, workplace wellness programs that prioritize sleep, and public health campaigns emphasizing sleep's importance are all part of this preventive approach. For those struggling with sleep onset difficulties, the message from current science is one of hope. Sleep onset insomnia is one of the most treatable sleep disorders. The combination of evidence-based behavioral interventions, targeted use of medications when appropriate, attention to sleep hygiene and environmental factors, and treatment of underlying conditions can help the vast majority of people who struggle to fall asleep. The key is often finding the right combination of approaches for each individual's specific situation and being patient with the process, as sustainable improvements in sleep typically take time to develop. Throughout this exploration, one theme emerges repeatedly: the extraordinary sophistication of the mechanisms that govern our transition from wakefulness to sleep. What might seem like a simple passive process of shutting down for the night is actually an active, highly orchestrated transformation involving changes at every level, from molecules to neural circuits to whole brain networks to behavior. Evolution has spent millions of years optimizing these mechanisms because sleep is essential for survival. The nightly transition to sleep represents one of the most fundamental state changes that consciousness undergoes, a regular journey from one mode of being to another. And yet, for all we've learned, mysteries remain. The full picture of how consciousness transforms during sleep onset is still incomplete. The precise mechanisms by which memories are selected for consolidation during these early sleep stages need further clarification. The role of sleep onset in emotional regulation, in immune function, in cellular repair is only partly understood. Each answer generates new questions. Each discovery reveals new complexity. But perhaps that's appropriate. The transition to sleep that nightly journey from wakefulness to dreams, from engagement with the external world to internal processing and restoration, reflects something fundamental about the nature of consciousness itself. It reminds us that our wakeful awareness, as vivid and real as it seems, is just one state our brain can occupy, one configuration of neural activity among many possibilities. The fact that we can smoothly transition between these states, that consciousness can transform so profoundly yet reversibly night after night, reveals something about the brain's remarkable plasticity and the constructed nature of our subjective experience. As you prepare for sleep tonight and every night, you can appreciate the journey you're about to take. The chemical changes beginning in your hypothalamus and spreading throughout your brain. The shift in electrical patterns as neurons synchronize their firing into sleep's characteristic rhythms. Your body cooling, your heart slowing, your muscles releasing their tension. Memories from the day being reactivated and consolidated, strengthened or pruned according to their importance. The gradual dissolution of self-awareness and time sense as you drift through hypnagogia's twilight. And finally, the completion of the transition into true sleep, ready for the cycles of sleep stages that will structure your night. It's a journey you've made thousands of times, will make thousands more, and one that billions of humans make alongside you every night. Yet each transition carries its own subtle variations, its own unique neural trajectory from wakefulness to sleep. In those quiet moments as drowsiness deepens, as your thoughts begin to scatter and strange images dance across your inner vision, you're participating in one of the most fundamental and beautiful processes that animate human existence: the descent into sleep. This nightly letting go of consciousness's grip. This regular return to a state so different from waking, yet so necessary for it, deserves our wonder and appreciation. If you've enjoyed this deep exploration into what happens in your mind as you fall asleep, I'd love it if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to discover about the sleeping subconscious, about dreams and memory, about the mysteries that unfold while we rest. Each video here on the sleeping subconscious aims to bring you along on these journeys through the night to illuminate the extraordinary processes happening beneath the surface of awareness. Thank you for joining me on this particular journey, and may your own transitions to sleep be smooth, peaceful, and restorative. Sweet dreams, and I'll see you in the next video.